19th, 2021. I call this meeting of the Safety and Security Committee of the Waukesha Board of Education to order. General business. Julie, can you please verify that the meeting has been properly posted?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. And this is the time for our citizens to speak. Do we have anyone that would like to address the board? No? Okay. All right, we have an action item for our approval. We have the minute approval from the December 21st, 2020 meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And all opposed? Okay. Discussion items. Workers' compensation report by Kevin Miller.
Thank you. So Darren had just asked that we kind of recap what 2020 looked like. So we kind of looked at the calendar year data. So what you're looking at, the first part is the experience modification factor. So I'll talk about that in a moment. And then the second two pages kind of represent the losses that occurred in 2020, kind of by occupation and then by what kind of injury types we have seen. So through 2020, just in general, from a workers' compensation standpoint with COVID, we have seen a significant reduction in claims across the industry, or schools, I should say. And that trend continued for the school district of Waukesha as well. So this first piece, the first page here, the chart. So your experience modification factor, you're at 0.98. 1 is average for all school districts in the state of Wisconsin. In 2018, we kind of had an upward trend in some losses, and that has driven the experience modification factor up to that just below average. Historically, you've kind of been in the 80s for the most part, again, performing slightly better than other school districts in the state of Wisconsin. So what does that mean from a financial perspective? So every point of the experience modification factor represents about $7,400 in premium. So it's about a $14,000 savings just with that 2-point reduction. So total incurred, so when I say total incurred for workers' compensation claims, that includes medical and then paid medical, reserves for time off of work or disability that gets paid out. So it's paid expenses and then reserve expenses, and then total incurred are those two things added together. That's the just under $300,000 that we're looking at for calendar year 2020, and that was about 102 claims. Any questions on initial data there or the experience modification factor piece? So the first piece then on page 2, we look at total incurred losses by occupation. So we look at losses, we look at dollar amount, and then we want to look at claim count as well. So when we talk about claim count or frequency, frequency can lead to severity, severity being the larger dollar amounts. So we want to see where those trends are or what might be jumping out at us. So when you see the total incurred, really the thing to note, of that $290,000, $216,000 is represented by 2 claims, okay? So there are 2 claims basically driving all of this data. So when you see that large dollar amount associated with special ed, it's the 2 claims are falling in that area, okay? So it's not a matter of a gigantic red flag, but we look at the volume or the number of claims as well to tell us what's happening in that space. Last few years, we have started to see across schools that student behavior is a big driver for losses. In general, it's usually slips, trips, and falls, student behavior, and then strains or sprains or struck bys kind of fall into the same category. So those are kind of the top drivers for school districts. So nothing out of the ordinary, again, when we look at school districts in general. Any questions on this data here?
No, thank you.
Okay. And the next one, we just break the data down kind of the similar way, but looking at what happens. So slips, trips, and falls. Number one, that's the biggest piece. So the one claim was a teacher helping a student off of a table, and they both fell, and there was a strain to her leg. And then the other injury was related to a slip and fall on ice. So the slips and falls are the driving category there. Okay? And then student behavior, look at claim count on the far right, the 33, something we're always tracking. A lot of times those student behavior claims don't result in dollar amounts because they're bites, they're scratches, things like that, but it's something we want to track to continue to reduce that frequency over time. Wanted to stay high level, so questions or anything else I can clarify?
Yes, Mr. Montejo.
The last page where it says. I'm sorry, the last page where it says overexertion, what is that? I'm just,
So what is overexertion?
yes, sir.
So like trying to pick up a garbage can that's too heavy or picking up a box that's too heavy,
Okay.
usually trying to move something that you shouldn't be moving by yourself.
Okay,
Yep.
all right.
I think a couple of them were some tables that were moved. So you pick up a table and you feel something in your back, right? That's the overexertion piece.
Gotcha, thank you.
And exposure, I can clarify exposure too. Exposure falls into bee stings. So we had a couple of bee stings.
Oh.
And then some chemical exposure from a cleaning perspective. And then in the chemistry department, there were some inhaling fumes from chemicals.
Anyone have any other questions?
We are starting a new internal safety committee. We're hoping to get that off and running. Jess in my office will lead that, but to spend more time, just so you know, this isn't the only report we look at. We meet with Kevin annually, and then our safety committee that we're kind of reforming that used to be here years ago, will probably be meeting quarterly to dive into this information. Because we do want to see that mod come down a lot, because there is a significant fiscal impact. And it is frustrating that we're 2 claims away from, a great mod like we were,
Yep.
sub 0.8, so, which is very, very good. So just to give you some background information on this data.
And that 0.98, I actually think will fall off next year. We
Yeah,
should
it should
drop back
start
down
dropping.
next year. And then with 2020 performing well, that will help as well. So I think next year we actually should drop down into the low 90s, potentially high 80s.
It's a 3-year average, right?
3-year average, yep.
Yeah, so it takes us a while to come off those really bad years.
Yes, Mr. Montejo.
Thank you. Is there anything you need from this committee or maybe the policy committee to change instruction for employees on lifting or anything like that? I assume that's being taken care of, but I just don't want to let that slip by.
Yeah, that's one thing we hope to come out of our safety committee is to, because there's all kinds of information. M3 and EMC are both great sources of information.
Sure.
And really refining or at least revisiting, and maybe it reinforces what we're doing, a communication plan for staff, because a lot of it does fall into proper footwear, and especially in the spring when you have the thaw freeze going on.
Sure.
The water has to go somewhere on our parking lots, and you do your best, but those events still can occur. But that's what we're hoping to really get at is the communication part of it. And obviously Joe's department with the special ed aides, and some of the students that they deal with is a challenge too. And we do. You could probably speak to the training better than I
All of
can.
our special educators are trained in nonviolent crisis intervention. So when you see the behavior, being, the higher numbers of behavior, but it didn't result in all that much claim, with the exception of the kind of freak accident that happened. We're on top of the behavior component of it. It's just, we have to serve all kids, so.
Yeah, I certainly didn't mean to suggest otherwise. I was just curious. So that's a tough area. So.
I remember those safety committee meetings, or was it a subcommittee? How would I say that? Because
Yeah, it wasn't board level. It was a board member sat on it, and then it was, I think, well, maybe by just accident, there was an AD and a principal from each level, I want to say, and that went by the wayside. Well, when this committee formed, we were waiting to see, well, what came out of this committee, and now we're going to kind of regroup that, I guess, a subcommittee, I guess, to dive back into this. Again, I don't think it's the mods reflecting a void of what we've been doing, but I do think there's room for improvement at this point.
I think we've come a long way. And Joe, I remember those reports looking at the injuries from teachers, from student to teacher. And I thought, what is happening? We have like 7 stabbings of pencils, but it was 99.9% special ed.
Yep.
So, like when I saw the overexertion, my first thought was the backs, because I know a couple of special ed teachers they've got to do heavy lifting and the changing of diapers and all of that. So that's great that you have given them that professional development on those injuries to even happen.
Yeah, we've, through the referendum work, we've built in a number of mechanical lifts. So, for kids who need extra assistance, we now have a machine that helps us with it, not just, manpower, but the machine helps. And
Wonderful.
all of those things have been very helpful in keeping these staff injuries down.
Good.
Yeah, even if we don't need it now, we have bathrooms now that you can have those lift or changing rooms in the future, just add the equipment as needed. But I think it was greatly appreciated by by Joe's staff.
Yes.
Does anyone have any more other questions? Well, thank you, Mr. Miller, for coming.
And then I asked Kevin also, Steve's next on the agenda for cybersecurity, but I also asked Kevin to stick around to talk about our coverage for cybersecurity, since they were both here on the same. So I don't know who wants to go first, or if you just want to feel. Well, it might help our ratings.
So you just want me to overview kind
Yeah,
of
why
the
don't you just
cyber
go
liability
over
coverage?
overview and some of the things you're seeing, and I think
Sure.
it'll mirror a lot of what maybe Steve's going to say as well. But we do have coverage, and this has been an ongoing, as we get ready for our renewals, Kevin walks through areas of, greater risk or exposure, and cybersecurity has certainly been a hot topic the last handful of years at least. So if
Sure.
you just want to give us a high-level review, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's a constantly changing market, and I'm sure you're going to hear how much it's continued to change and how terrible claims have continued to get as well. The education space for cyber liability is awful. There's just no way to say it. I was just telling Darren before we started that we've actually, M3 working with some insurance companies, we had built a program for our school district clients, and it was all set to go. Most of those renewed July 1st, and last week they called and pulled out. They backed out of the program. They've stopped writing education accounts. So we kind of got to go back to the drawing board and start that process over. So this is what we're seeing frequently in the market. Districts in Wisconsin have experienced a $600,000 loss and an $800,000 loss associated with social engineering. So that's kind of being tricked in to give your money away is what that refers to. Everything looks legitimate, but you send the money out and it didn't go to the right account. So that's been the biggest piece. There was a tech college in the north side of the state. They were shut down with ransomware for 2 weeks, locked everything up. They were not able to have anything for 2 weeks. So the impact that has on a school to be able to deliver education and do anything virtually. So it's constantly changing, and they're getting much better at it, meaning they're taking more money too. So when you hear ransomware, it used to be we'll lock up your system, and you're going to give us X number of Bitcoin. That's what they would ask for. It used to be a low number. Now that number is really big. So we're seeing those numbers get into the $750,000 range, even into the 7-digit range in the private sector. So the claims continue to get worse. You do have coverage. One thing we'll probably talk about with Darren at the time of renewal is a higher limit potentially. So you have $1 million limit right now, and we'll probably look at some benchmarking options and see if a higher limit would make sense for the school district. But it is broad coverage. It's with a company called Beasley. They're one of the best in the industry from a cyber liability perspective. So there is coverage there. They can give you access to forensics. They can give you some penetration testing, vulnerability assessments. They can help with all those things as well. So that kind of gives you the quick overview. Any questions from a coverage perspective?
One interesting story that Kevin shared was they're thinking about issuing paper policies on this again and not having electronic documents, because they're actually getting into your file, seeing how much coverage you have. And that's where the request comes in at, just south of that. So it's just an interesting situation we find ourselves in, and not alone, but certainly a lot of exposure there potentially.
Yeah, so historically they would get into your system, turn the ransomware on, and then you'd go back a couple days and use your backup tapes. Now they go into your system and they stay there for 6 months, and then your backup tapes are no good because they're still there when you put the backup tape on. So they've gotten much better at their processes.
I'm not sure how they sleep at night, but that's not for me to decide.
No.
Correct. Well, we used to say too that they used to be really ethical. So if you paid the ransom, they usually left. Now you pay the ransom and they're like, oh, they paid. Let's do it again. So they'll come back 6 months later and do it again. So they've even eliminated their ethical thievery.
Wow. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Do we have any questions for him?
Kevin's going to stay during Steve's thing in case there's a question
Okay.
that might come up.
All right. Welcome, Steve.
Great. Thank you. Well, I'm not going to go into gory detail on this because number one, I don't want the details actually out in the public. But two, I just want to give you an overview kind of where we're at and just to make sure, ease your mind a little bit that we are working on these issues every day. As Kevin said, the number of incidents and the severity of the incidents are rapidly increasing, and Wisconsin seems to be a target, and Wisconsin municipalities, public sector seems to be a big target, probably most likely because they don't necessarily have the IT infrastructure and the staff and the money to spend to secure their facilities. So the first thing we're going to talk about is most of you probably saw an email from me describing the phishing training that we started just before spring break. We subscribed to the Know Before platform. It's one of the industry leaders in phishing training. It actually allows you to simulate phishing on your employees. Seems evil, but when necessary evil. And the employees, then you can keep track of who actually fell for the phishing attack and who did not. And then along with that, it automates the training process. They have some very good cyber incident training that can be applied to your users. Our initial phishing test was sent out on the week of March 23rd. The results, I think, were very promising. We had 2.5% of our users that clicked on the test email. Typical for a K-12 in the industry is about 24% on the initial test without any training involved. So that means our users are getting quite tech savvy, and they're doing a good job of being able to look at emails and see which ones are phishing or malware infested. I was reading some articles, and they said about 90% of the attacks that are happening are coming in through phishing emails. They're coming in through and these are not like, the Nigerian prince type emails that we used to get, right? Those were pretty easy to identify with all kinds of spelling errors and things like that. The new ones are very sophisticated. They spend time social engineering you. They will look at your Facebook pages. They will look at the web pages that a school puts out, and they will send emails to the staff at, let's say, Hillcrest. They will target the Hillcrest staff with a simulated email from the Hillcrest principal, So they are very sophisticated at what they're doing and learning about, who their target is and trying to trick folks into using that. So after the initial phishing test, next week we'll be issuing an initial training that goes along with that, and there's about a 15-minute video. I can show you a little example of that here in the system, and then the other users that actually did click on the email, they will get additional training above and beyond that, and then we will have recurring tests throughout the year. where they will, we'll send out a phishing campaign, they call it, and then basically we'll track, again, how well we're doing. So any questions about that? I'll quick get out of this and jump in and show you that, an example of that training.
Excuse me, Steve. So this is only for our staff right now.
Correct.
Do you ever test our families?
Unfortunately, Karen, this is a quite expensive training.
Okay.
So just to test our staff, I'm limited to staff. I can't even go to students because at this point, that would break my bank to do that.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, I would
Just wanted to ask.
love to. We did have a discussion today. There is some really well done free training that Cisco is putting out. That we're proposing to cyber awareness training that we're proposing to make available to our families, sort of on a self-enroll basis. So that's another idea we just came up today. So this is an example of that, what a staff member will get to. I'll just run a couple seconds of it here and.
After completing this module, you will be able to identify the techniques hackers use to trick you and gain access to your organization's resources, recognize the warning signs of a hacker's attack, and take action to protect yourself and your organization from a hacker's attack. You will encounter many new technical terms. It is crucial that you become familiar with them. If at any point there is a term that you don't understand, you can pause the video and access the glossary in this module's menu. At the end of the module, you will take a brief quiz.
So you can see that's a very well done video. It's a very professional video. This one is 15 minutes long. That's going to be our initial assignment, but they have some that are 30, 45 minutes long. They go much more in depth. They also have some for staff members. They have some for executives that talk about the things that they have to watch out for and things like that too. So we're going to be utilizing that more because we paid for the whole platform. So it'll be good to utilize that training. So any questions about the email phishing or the training program that we're going to go there?
I have one more.
Okay, go ahead, Karen.
So what security does our training, I should say, do our students get? Like, let's say they're in first grade or a senior. Do they get a 15-minute video or anything, almost like a reading strategy? A, are you expecting an email from this person? B, like something brief? Because I know they say, you always warn us, and we get warnings that says, hey, don't click on anything suspicious, but that's just such a broad view. What do our children get?
We have we use the Common Sense Media, commonsense.org.
Okay.
It's a very good framework for families and for children. And our teachers actually, that's part of their curriculum. They get a digital citizenship piece, and part of it is exactly that. They talk about their digital footprint. They talk about social media, what
Okay.
they should not be putting out there, who they should be talking to. Yeah.
Anyone else? Carry on, Steve. Thank you.
All right. So the next one actually talks about cybersecurity. Like Kevin said, the attacks have increased dramatically. On average, this is a statistic I heard, on average there are about 2 Wisconsin public sector organizations per week that fall victim. A lot of them aren't as severe as the ones Kevin were talking about that are $1 million claims. But the amount of money that is involved isn't necessarily, even if you don't pay ransomware, you still are going to run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars to mitigate your systems and clean it up, because you need a whole army of people to basically come in and rebuild your things. You could easily run through that $1 million claim, even if you're not paying ransom to anybody. And I think it is against the law now, if I'm not mistaken, to actually pay that ransom. But just the mitigation and the cleanup and the triage, basically, to figure out exactly what happened and to let people know, if you leaked any sensitive information. Just that involved, it's weeks. It takes weeks, and sometimes you have to actually monitor the system for like 6 months at least to make sure that there isn't some recurring attacks that are going to happen. So, those claims get quite large quite rapidly. Like I said before, most attacks are coming from the phishing emails because those are. We put all these, like I said, we put all these moats and these firewalls up, but then we have screen doors basically on our email. Basically, we just, it's kind of like Kramer going, "Hey, come on in, neighbor," because it was, it's a lot of times we don't even pay attention to what we're clicking on sometimes. One of the things we're working on right now is we're working with Heartland Business Systems. That's our system integrator we use. We're updating our cyber incident response plan. And I'm sure we'll be getting together with the insurance company as well to, once we get that all worked out, they have a thing that they call a tabletop exercise that we probably will be executing probably this summer. And that's where we sit around and do an actual simulated attack. We don't actually do the attack. We actually act as if an attack has happened and do a drill, basically. And then we talk about what we need to do, who we need to contact, things like that. So. And then we're constantly updating our tools and our monitoring software. So we have a new tool that we just got from Microsoft that's helped us out quite a bit recently to watch any kind of intrusion activity, and so that's been helpful. And then the last line is, the cyber attacks cost a lot of money. In my mind, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, because it's going to cost us money to protect against this and train, but it's going to cost us way more if we're ever compromised. So, any questions about that? No? Okay. All right, the next item is actually physical security. Way back last year, we were actually concerned about actual physical building security. That seems to be a long time ago, but we just recently updated our standard response protocol. And if you remember what that is, that's what we follow when there's a lockdown in the building or any kind of event happening. There's two new terms, the classroom hold. You can kind of see it there in that purple with the door with the line through it. And then the one next to it we used to call lock out, but that was too close to lock down. So they changed that terminology to secure. And you can, so we've updated this is our custom made software that we developed a couple years ago and still in use. And we updated our procedures to follow that, and our software now is up to date with that. So I don't know if you guys I think most of you have probably seen a demo of this system at some point or another. I don't know if you want to see another demo or tonight, or it's just press the button and watch it go off. I don't know. Do you have any desire to see that or no?
Pardon?
I've seen it.
Yeah, I do. But
No need? Okay. All right. I think that's about it. So it's a short and sweet discussion about the things that we're worried about, but we are worried about them constantly. So.
Committee members, do you have any questions for Steve? Yes, Mr. McCaffrey?
Is this the program that
Correct. Yep. It locks the doors and sends messages also, and it message like the speaker there or the phone, and it also can message personal cell phones and things like that. So. We're also working to try and tie it in with our digital signage now in the buildings. The TVs that we have up on the wall, so that'll give a signal on there as well.
How long do you think before that's ready?
The digital signage piece, it's going to be probably midway through next year, probably, before that's all working.
Okay.
We are adding, actually, the elementary schools. We have all the clocks. You can see it behind Patrick on the table there. We have all of those installed now at all the secondary schools, and we're working through the elementary schools. I think we got the 3 projects that we're working on this summer. Those will all be in there. Darren just ordered those for us, and then we'll continue to every elementary school every couple years. We'll probably work through getting those updated.
So every school, all of their clocks in the school are going to be the same, and they're going to be these?
Yes,
Okay.
eventually. Right now, we've got, there's probably about 8 elementary schools left to go, so.
Okay. Excellent. Mr. McCaffrey?
Is that coming out of the technology budget?
Referendum, I
That's,
think.
Darren figures that out somehow.
Okay.
Clocks?
Yeah, the clocks.
It's funny, every year these clocks come up, Steve and I look at each other like, who paid for that last
Yeah,
year?
right, exactly.
So this year's my turn. I quite honestly don't remember who did it last year, but Steve and I kind of come together at the end of every fiscal year and make things
Yeah.
work, so.
A lot of it came out of the referendum stuff, so the middle schools were all
Middle
referendum
schools were
dollars.
definitely referendum.
Yeah. And the,
Also had the school safety grant.
That's what I was gonna
that
say.
oh
paid
yeah,
for a
that's
lot of
right.
this.
The high schools were a school safety grant.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you bought those ones from South Milwaukee.
Yep.
Was part
I
of
think I
it.
paid for those. Yeah.
So it's been kind of a,
Spread it
Yeah.
out a little bit.
yeah.
We had like a garage sale on those. South Milwaukee had pulled them out because they weren't the right exact clock that they wanted, and so they had them all
They're all
sitting in a
brand new.
warehouse, and we got them for like 20% of the price. So
Love it.
yeah.
Good job, Steve. Well, thank you so much.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
Try to get some sleep.
He just laughs.
Okay, moving on to the DPI summary of revisions to CDC, DHS, DPI guidance for schools. Mr. Cook?
So thank you. Yeah, so as the school year has gone forward, as we've discussed at more meetings, I think, than any of us can count, the state of the state around COVID has continually evolves. We just wanted to bring you to attention to the April 9th updates to the guidance, which reflect the 3-foot distancing, the strong recommendation for universal masking. It acknowledges that schools have been open and open safely using proper mitigation strategies. And it continues to clarify what is a close contact and the quarantines associated with it. So this guidance goes from the CDC at the federal level to the DHS at the state level. And then this is what Waukesha County adopts and strongly suggests school districts follow. It stays in that alignment. This is what our plans have been based off of. So we do have another opportunity, this agenda, or not next agenda, but the following, where we'll talk a little bit more about our mitigation strategies year round. But if there's something that stands out in here that you'd like to ask questions about right now, I'm happy to answer them.
Can you just repeat that last 10 seconds? So since we only meet every few months, it's not going to be the next one, but the following? Does that mean?
No, the item, we have the mitigation is the 5th item on the agenda tonight.
Oh, I see.
So we're going to go
Okay.
more into depth there.
I see.
We do have the air quality in between the two.
Mr. Montijo?
Hi, Dr. Cook. It talks about removing the recommendation for physical barriers.
Yep.
Is that something the administration is looking into doing shortly?
We have them in place right now and we're using them as we've had them. Is it something that needs to be there based off the CDC? No, but it's something that we've used this school year. So we haven't made that recommendation to our schools yet, but it's certainly something that we can discuss. You know, it's our hope that we're able to continue forward with the plan that we have in place to get us to June and then to get our reopening or our operations committee going here within the next few weeks to start to talk about what next school year looks like.
Yeah, I think we're all looking forward to getting this school year over. It can be a tad bit frustrating, though, if we're going to go off CDC, DHS, and DPI guidance, and then they say we're okay to remove barriers while we're not doing it.
We did purchase them. And I think that some of the logic was if we've purchased them, we should use them. A lot of this guidance was coming at the time when large school districts were still not opening up. So if you go back a few weeks, there were a lot of larger school districts or school districts around the country that were saying, we can't open up because of 6 feet. Well, you guys can do it with 3 feet. We can't get all the physical barriers in place. You don't need physical barriers. So there was some back and forth as I read that kind of went from what these suggestions are. Back in August, September, we purchased the plexiglass and got it set up. But again, that's part of our overall mitigation strategy that the whole board, can certainly discuss.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Joe and I spoke a little earlier about when we get to item E, we're going to discuss some things in a little bit greater detail. Do you have any questions, Mr. McCaffrey?
Nope, I live it every day.
Okay.
Lower.
All right. Moving on. Okay. We're going to talk about air quality study by Darren Clark.
Just to bring you up to, most of you probably remember Joe from our HVAC conversations leading up to the school opening, so he's back. We had some, we've been going through radon testing for the district and got some good news, I think, that we thought we'd share with you. So we have a pretty short PowerPoint with 6 slides. One of them is the question slide.
Darren, you're not plugged in.
Sorry. Should I start over from scratch? I'll just do it abbreviated. Kyle McCarthy, who's our new maintenance manager, and Joe Hines are here from the service building, who's leads our HVAC team, are here. We've talked a lot about HVAC systems, and we got radon tests for the district. Actually, these tests have been going on since 2018, but now every school and facility in the district has been tested. And we just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of the results that we found. So if I can, you guys want to?
Over the past several years, September 2018 through May 2020, the district has been running random radon tests in all of our sites. The district hired EMC to conduct the test. EMC is the district's environmental consultant on most building-related issues. They also assist with required staff safety training. The testing occurred over the colder months under normal occupied conditions to test for a worst-case scenario and average over time. A radon monitoring device was hung in occupied spaces throughout the school. Usually, it was in a space that was used for 4 hours a day. The devices were retrieved after 90-plus days of exposure and then sent to an approved laboratory. If a space does test higher than recommended levels, corrective measures are taken and the areas are retested.
You might have seen these. Actually, there was one in here too. So throughout the districts, have you ever seen these little black discs hanging up from the ceiling? That's what's occurring. So we thought we'd throw a picture in there.
So basically, once we received those results back from environmental management consultants, we began addressing the areas that they provided us that needed attention. Basically, out of the 24 sites that were tested, we only had 3 areas of concern. Of those sites, Hadfield, Randall, and Lindholm had a couple issues, but none of the spaces were classrooms that had areas of concern. And basically, with those findings, all the areas where results were higher than recommended, basically by the EPA, was 4 picoliters, have been addressed and related by retested, by environmental management consultants. These radon levels were measured, and they were somewhat higher than what they were recommended. So we had put some fixes into place and invited them back out to retest, and we got our levels down below the level of 4 of picoliters, what was recommended or less. So we were happy about that. Basically at Lindholm and Hadfield, we had to put in ventilation systems that would lower those numbers down, and we didn't want to have to chase our tails on it, so we did a little research and development and implemented these fixes before we invited them back out to ensure that we had the numbers sustained below the levels needed for occupants in the workspace setting. So. Basically, these were on the next slide. These are the dates that were ran for the testing that was worked through with environmental management consultants in all the buildings.
The nice thing is we have 2.4 million square feet, and we had 6 rooms essentially, maybe not even full-size classrooms, but that had some mediation that was required. And of those 6 or so, most of them were in this building, oddly. Dr. Siebert joined that club as part of that conversation. But for like here, for example, the original building, it's a dirt basement, and obviously lends itself to that. So as of today, we have a benchmark where we know of all the areas tested. And I don't know how many test discs there was, maybe even 1,000. We have no radon above recommended levels, and radon, in my understanding, is you either have it or you tend not to have it. You know, if you have a clean slate at one point, unless you've changed something with your HVAC system or something, you tend not to get it again. So Tim Williamson and I had decided, let's just get that benchmark of data, because these conversations would come up periodically in buildings where people maybe there was a cluster of staff that were feeling ill or whatever. So I think we have a good benchmark to move forward from. So that was the reasoning behind the report tonight, was just to let you know we think we're in a very good place. And Joe and his team and Kyle and the people at the service building, for the few areas we had, all have been fully retested and we're good to go. Questions?
Montajo.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you for doing that. I know the city of Waukesha and Waukesha County has tremendous radon values, or I shouldn't say tremendous, but quite a bit. You just have to drive around neighborhoods and look for that white piping coming out of the side of people's basements.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is that essentially what we're doing in those rooms, or?
In a sense, but a little larger scale.
Okay.
We evaluated a couple different options for each area and determined what would have been the best fix. Some were a slam dunk, some took a little bit of figuring out to do, but we got it all ironed out. And yes, they would be running 24/7.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Because it's not like asbestos where you can go in and clean it up. It's either there or it's not. So, okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, but pretty much come down, it always reverts back to ventilation at some point, turning air, so.
Do you have anything?
All right, so I thought that was some good news worth sharing, so.
Yes, I have one question. Is that for PCIL? How do you say that?
Picoliters?
Picoliters.
It's the amount of radioactivity in a liter of air,
Okay.
or I should say disintegrated radioactive material in a liter of air.
So is that calculation or recommendation the same as a house would be?
It's ideally, we were almost pretty close to what they would do residentially as well,
Okay.
for a office space setting or a classroom setting.
Okay.
We didn't divert from that, so.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great news.
Thank you, guys.
And side note, there's a dirt, like if you walk down to the basement of this place, it's dirt. Wow.
We don't go there, we just talk about it.
Talk about it.
Unless the tornado sirens are going off, then we might venture, but. Yeah, there's a tour after the meeting if anyone wants to.
We could charge,
326.
make some money, tell some stories.
Yeah, I took a poll on my staff like 2 years ago, and half of them said, I'll just take a chance on the tornado, so.
Well, thank you. All right, moving on to COVID mitigation strategies.
Thank you. So as Mrs. Reinacek and I were getting ready for the meeting, Mrs. Reinacek had some questions on some of our mitigation strategies, masks, now that the mask mandate is over, quarantines. And so what I suggested is that we talk just a little bit more broadly about everything that we've done from the beginning of the year to now, and then have a discussion as you see fit on the topics that you'd like to review. I have 4 presentations in front of you. I promise you we will not go through all of them tonight. You can look at them electronically or in the paper form. But these are the most recent presentations that we've given to you as to kind of the state of the state on things. So going back to June of last year, we had a mitigation reopening committee to talk about how we were going to reopen our schools. It was at that time that we took our best guesses to try to figure out what were going to be our obstacles this year, and then we planned off of that. We figured at that time that really the idea around quarantines would be the biggest issue because the impact that could have on both students and staff and their presence in the building. So the mitigation team, we talked about the areas from food service to busing to the instructional spaces and the instructional plans to how we were going to clean our buildings and what we were going to expect people to do while they were in our buildings. So we put together a pretty comprehensive plan, and then we launched the school year. If you remember, at that time, we were hybrid at the secondary, we were face-to-face at the elementary. Mid-October, we made the decision to go to a 4-day-a-week model at the secondary and then stay 5 days a week at the elementary. It was at about that time that our state, our county, and our city began to see higher numbers of COVID cases. That peaked somewhere around Thanksgiving, and it was around that time, I believe, that we went back to a hybrid model at the secondary and then a 5-day-a-week at the elementary. We saw our numbers stay high in early December. Those numbers began to come down through the winter break. And then after winter break in early January, those numbers trended down to a very low point today. I think we've had 5 or 6 positive cases and maybe 30 kids quarantined, 0 staff positive, 4 staff quarantined. So we saw this cycle kind of come through our schools. Some of the consistent stuff that we've done, though, is we maintained screenings at the door of students. We maintained the close contacts from the CDC and DHS. We maintained masking and cleaning. We have spread kids around our buildings to have lunch. We've maintained the plexiglass barriers that we purchased at the time. So we haven't changed much in the mitigation planning. We made some minor tweaks. I think it was back in December, January when we were in front of the whole board, just as the evolution of things came forward. And so that gets us then to where we're at today. As our discussion, Mrs. Reinacek and I talked, we had a mask mandate at the state level in place for the better part of the year. That has since expired. We have continually reinforced the expectations around what is a close contact. We learned some lessons through the school year where quarantine numbers were high. They matched case numbers, and they were not too far off of what we saw from some other Waukesha County and other school districts. They saw very similar contacts that we did. And so that leads us then into our discussion then tonight. And Dr. Siebert and I, Mr. Clark, we're here and able to answer any questions that the committee may have on the mitigation plan that we've put in place. Again, as I mentioned before, we're hopeful that we can continue that through the end of the school year, reevaluate for the 21-22 school year. But ultimately, many of those changes are up to the board.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I think so. Oh, I'm sorry, may I? Yeah, the recap, it seems like a lifetime ago we were doing this. There's been so much. As far as everything, there's been so much. I think everybody's goal is to try to keep kids in the classroom.
Absolutely.
Mine is too. If you look back on what we all talked about, we just have different opinions on how we do that. But I think we've all kind of come together and said, look, that's what we've been doing, trying to keep kids in the classroom. Masks, it's still a big issue. I'm not a big fan of them. I can't breathe through them. I'd much rather have the kids not have them. But if I'm consistent in my goals is keep kids in the classroom, keep the mask on. As if we don't, for whatever reason, right or wrong, a whole lot of these kids are going to get pulled from class, and that doesn't do anybody any good. Whether their parents support it or not, kids need to be in school. So I know I'm getting a lot of contacts. I'm sure everybody else is, but over the summer, going into next year, that's a whole new ballgame. I'm going to reassess what's going on and just do what we all been doing. Check the research, speak with people, and listen. So plexiglass thing does bug me, but of the million things that bug me, it's the lower level. The reason is, and it's the only thing I'll say is, it's usually the younger kids, and it's just, if we could get that out, I think it would be a lot easier for them to feel more comfortable. But I will tell you, skipping back to the mask, I asked my daughter and I asked a lot of her friends, what do you guys think about the mask? She said, just leave it alone. Just leave it alone. They've gotten used to it. So it's the first time she's been right in a while. So she doesn't watch it, so that's good. But so this is kind of what I'm thinking. But
Mr. McCaffrey, any?
No, I don't really have any questions. Went through all this at all the meetings that we have, so I don't really have any questions about what we're doing right now. Like I said, I live it every day at a different district, so almost all the districts are doing the same stuff. So moving forward, like Corey said, we'll have to discuss what we do next year.
Okay, well, I had different options and feelings, and I wanted to bring this forward just to discuss here, and thank you for your comments. Because we have a month and a half, however many weeks left of school, by the time if we were to have a discussion around this here, move it to the full board and be able to do something this year, I thought it would be a great opportunity to bring it up if we should experiment in the last month of school, in the last 3 weeks of school, whatever we have left by the time that timing happens. Just to, just not to see what happens, but I want to, I don't want to say. My fear is that people keep saying, okay, well, next fall. Do you remember when they just kept saying 2 more weeks last year where we would be off of school? And then it just extended, and we wouldn't be sitting here right now even discussing this had we not spoken up to get kids back to school. So I was feeling that if we could look at different places, different states, different districts, different schools, and even right here in Wisconsin and in Waukesha, there's private schools that have not had masks, and the kids have been in school. So I wanted to either address the quarantines or the masks. Let's talk about them and try something in the last few weeks of school to see if the sky falls, to see if this blows up again like in Thanksgiving. And if it doesn't, then we have a great snapshot of the fall because we have a long break this summer. And I know that it's asking a lot, but I thought we could just at least have the discussion after we have some data that Mr. Cook, I asked him at the last minute last week when we were talking about this day, it would take him a while to get. So I just figured we could just have a discussion about it.
And I'm happy to go look elsewhere. There was, in one of the research studies that we presented, it was conducted, trying to remember the university. It was through their business school because they were looking at the economic impact of COVID. And so they studied, I think it was about 65,000 students and I think it was about 10,000 staff, or maybe it was 250,000 kids and 60,000 staff. I apologize for not remembering exactly. But they started to go through like the mitigation strategies, and they were making the case that you can be in school. But it was, if you went through their simulator and if you check the box of, are masks present and then what's the rate of spread in the school? And as we looked at that time, it was clear that what we were doing, was working. And as So I'll definitely go and look to see what I can find from other states. One of the things, though, that as we get closer to the end of the year, and I just offer this as information, it's, we're coming upon prom and graduation, and we know that, and we've heard loud and clear from parents and kids that, they really want to be able to celebrate those things. They missed the prom last year. We were able to do graduation, but graduation was a little bit late. And, if I could just offer, I wouldn't want to do anything right now to jeopardize those opportunities for kids. And certainly open to have the conversation for next school year.
Did prom just happen this past weekend?
I forget when the proms were.
Graduation is when school is out.
June
So,
12th, right?
pardon?
Yeah,
Yeah,
graduation will be
that
June
would-
12th,
So that would be after school is out anyway.
unless you impacted the kids before school was out so that they
Oh,
couldn't
I see.
participate
I
in
see
the
what you're
ceremony.
saying. Okay, I see.
So,
Mr. McCaffrey?
I totally understand what you're saying, Karen, and I think that you do need to have a trial balloon go up.
A what?
A trial balloon go up before next school year. And I was thinking we would do that at summer school.
Okay, and I thought of that as well. What does the spacing look like? Do we have 7 kids in the classroom? That's all part of this data that I want to get. What does summer school typically look like? I don't think I've ever
Range
visited a
based off
classroom.
of interest. We're planning a summer school menu that looks very much like every other summer school experience that we had. So I guess running summer school as we've always run it, our planning right now is to carry forward with the mitigation strategies, maintaining masks and stuff. But when we set out this year, we never said that we could socially distance in school. So we never made that guarantee. We were going to spread kids out the best we could, but we were never going to, we just couldn't. You couldn't triple the size of your buildings in order to triple the space in a classroom. And so, going forward, that's what the planning has been. Carry forward with masks, get rid of the temperature checks at the beginning of the school day, get the kids in, have their art experience and their math experience and their reading experience or whatever it is, and then, get them out and send them on their way. So we weren't looking at, there could be some classes as low as 10 kids, but there could also be classes with 15 or 20 in them too.
So let me just be clear that I'm hearing you correctly. You are saying that the conversation is happening, whether to have summer school without masks and taking temperatures and all of that, and just run it as usual?
Maintaining masks,
Maintaining
eliminating the
masks.
temperature checks and the screening, and then having a kind of a traditional summer school format for kids, but maintaining masks and extra cleaning and such.
And thank you. Mr. McCaffrey, you're suggesting that we have a discussion that maybe summer school be our trial instead of the end of the school year?
Yeah.
Okay,
For exactly the reasons that Dr. Cook was talking about with graduations and proms and everything coming up in the sports, that we finish out the year the way we are right now, and then we test it out in the summer at summer school.
okay,
And then we'll know for sure.
okay.
With a smaller test group than an entire school.
Mr. Montijo?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Mr. McCaffrey. I would love to do it tomorrow. I get your sentiment. I just think it's not, I think it's going to blow up. And I think it's going to keep kids out of school. I guess what I'm curious, though, is the issue of mitigation should be on, or I think I would ask that it be on the general board meetings.
Oh, I think we have to discuss it at the board level for sure.
Yeah. What I don't want to do is have it not on the agenda and it
Right.
skips through May and goes through June.
Right.
We've
We
got
have
2
to-
new board members coming on that has,
Yep.
the issue's got to be there.
Right.
So if we don't raise it now as a discussion issue for the next board meeting, is it going to be on there? Or is there a way to determine that here?
Ask Dr. Siebert
Maybe not May, but
Board
June.
president sets the agenda.
yeah.
Yeah, right. Is it unless, okay. Well, this is a discussion item, right?
Okay,
It is listed currently as a discussion item under safety and security, and
Okay.
knowing how we roll things forward, we have to, we follow that format going from one meeting to the next.
Right.
so here we can discuss it like we are, and
Right.
then we can just ask if we can bring it in front of the board.
Yeah, we'll have to work it the way that we did the last one under the general items as an action.
Right. On the right.
Because it
I'm
can't
sorry,
be
I'm
under
just talking.
ours as an action because it's not agenda as here as an action, so we can't
Right.
put it on our agenda on the full board meeting as an action item. It's going to have to go into the general items, when we do the opportunity for citizens to speak, that whole section. That's usually how we run the discussions and action around the mitigation.
Yes, Mr. Montijo?
Right. You're
Chair should contact the president to have it agendized.
Or what about the superintendent right here?
Well, the superintendent could also make the comment, but I think it would come,
Can we bring this discussion forward, or do I need to call?
no, Joe sets the agenda.
Okay. I thought you and Joe did it together, but,
We do it together.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I think it would be helpful, as Mr. McCaffrey says, if you would speak with him, and I can also share the
Okay.
conversation from today.
I will do that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
And then in your report at the main board meeting, you can talk about this discussion as well. So
Yeah,
at least it's out there and we're
yeah. Well, we want to
Discussing.
discuss and take action item if the majority of the board is okay with us running that trial balloon this summer. We're going to need to get it done in May,
right.
because we can't do it in June.
Okay, so just summarizing, if I contact Joe tonight and say we would like to have it on the board, on the agenda for the full board for our May meeting, is it possible then he could put it on the agenda as a discussion item or an action item?
Action item.
Okay. Okay. Yes?
I just think it's that big of a deal that the entire board should deal with. And they
Oh,
can
for
say, no, we're
sure.
not doing anything, so.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
was, that was the
Yep.
whole intention of
And-
starting it here.
Do it sooner than later.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Dr. Cook. Okay, so under other business, do we have any recommendations for future committee meetings here? Mr. Montijo?
This goes back to the incident at South. I think that gentleman just had his bond revoked. We talked about this a couple times. I'd like to get what I call a TikTok from when we for someone knew something was wrong, what happened next, who contacted who, that whole thing that we've talked about. Is it still too early to do that because the case is still pending?
Yeah,
Okay.
again, going back to what we were originally asked was, let the trial run its course.
Okay.
If it goes, assuming it goes to, if we do a public thing and it goes to trial and we go into the details of it, you wouldn't
Right.
want a potential juror to be compromised or, the courts better than I, but it was just, keep it quiet until that part's done and then certainly you can have your discussion about it.
Makes
You know,
sense. Is that
knowing
something? I'm sorry.
Just knowing that it's a student-specific thing, we'd have to talk, I guess, about the proper environment to do it, because that person is still a student with the school district.
Okay, yeah, I'm talking more of an overview, because we've got all these procedures and policies, which are great, but when it's tested, did it work? And if things can always get better. Is that something the administration could start now but not disclose until the trial and appeals? Because that could go, the trial could go, I don't even think it's scheduled for a trial yet. There could be appeals and all those other things.
From a matter of having it all laid out, like
That the work is done, so when that case is finalized.
done,
I'm sorry?
it's done.
The TikTok,
Whatever
Okay.
the after-action review is done.
Oh, it is. Okay. So it's not like when it's cleared from the trial, it's going to take 6 months to get it.
No,
It's
no.
done.
When it's cleared from the trial, it would take 6 days to come to you guys. And
Gotcha. Okay. Appreciate it.
McCaffrey, anything? Okay. Thank you all for all the work that you do for this. And the next safety and security meeting is scheduled for June 21st at 6 p.m. right here. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.